The city glittered that night, a maze of silver lights and whispered secrets. Yet in one corner of that vast brilliance stood a man determined to be unseen. Adrian Voss, the elusive billionaire whose name made stock markets tremble, had grown weary of the gold-digging smiles and hollow promises that surrounded him. So, one night, under the cloak of anonymity, he vanished. He abandoned his mansion, his limousines, his tailored suits, everything, in their place. He wore a simple gray shirt, faded jeans, and the name Ethan. To the world, he was just another man searching for work. To himself, he was searching for something money could never buy: genuine love. Weeks later, he found employment as a handyman in a quiet mansion on the outskirts of the city. The house belonged to an aging widow, Mrs. Davenport, whose household ran under the sharp yet graceful command of her young maid, Clara. Clara wasn't like anyone Adrian had ever met. She moved with quiet confidence, her steps light, her gaze steady, her voice gentle but unshakably real. She worked tirelessly, cared for the old lady like her own mother, and never once complained. There was no pretension in her, no hunger for wealth, no hint of vanity. She seemed untouched by the world's greed. One afternoon, while fixing the garden fence, Adrian overheard Clara talking to Mrs. Davenport. Her words stopped him cold. "I don't trust rich men," Clara said softly. "They think they can buy hearts the way they buy cars. But love doesn't have a price tag." Her voice lingered in the air, pure and certain. Adrian's heart tightened. He wanted to tell her who he really was, but he couldn't. Not yet. He needed to know whether her kindness was real or just another illusion. Days turned into weeks. Adrian found excuses to be near her, helping with chores, walking her home after long shifts, sharing quiet laughter over evening tea. Slowly, a bond began to form. Clara started to see something in Ethan: sincerity, humility, and warmth that made her chest tighten in ways she didn't understand. But one stormy night changed everything. Mrs. Davenport's health suddenly collapsed. Adrian stayed by Clara's side, holding her trembling hands as they waited for the ambulance. Rain poured down. Thunder cracked the sky, and in that fragile, trembling moment, Clara whispered, "If anything happens to her, I don't know how I'll go on." Her tears broke something inside him. He wrapped his arms around her, not as a billionaire or a man in disguise, but as someone who had finally found what he'd been looking for: love, raw and unpolished. After the old lady recovered, Clara sat beside Adrian one evening, watching the sunset bleed across the sky. "You've been so kind, Ethan," she said quietly. "I don't know what I would have done without you." Adrian smiled faintly, torn between truth and deception. "You have survived," he said softly. "You're stronger than you know." But fate was cruel, and the truth never stayed buried for long. A week later, while cleaning the study, Clara stumbled upon a familiar name in a newspaper that had slipped out of a drawer: Adrian Voss, billionaire CEO of Voss Industries, missing for 2 months. The picture beside it made her freeze. It was him. Her hands trembled. The man she'd trusted, the man she'd begun to love, wasn't Ethan. He was the very kind of man she'd sworn she would never fall for. That evening, she didn't speak a word to him. Adrian sensed a change. The silence between them was sharp as glass. When he finally approached her, her eyes were cold, glistening with unshed tears. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you lie to me?" Adrian tried to explain, his words tumbling out in broken sincerity, about his search for truth, about wanting to be loved for who he was, not what he owned. But Clara shook her head, her voice trembling. "You didn't trust me enough to tell me the truth. You wanted to test me, like I was part of your game." She turned to leave, but something in his voice stopped her. "I didn't hide my money to test you, Clara," he said, his voice raw. "I hid it to find you." Her heart faltered, but the wound of betrayal ran deep. She left the mansion that night, the echo of her footsteps haunting him long after she was gone. For days, Adrian searched for her. He sent people, made calls, even walked the streets himself. The empire he'd built meant nothing now. All he wanted was the woman who had taught him what love really was, and walked away because he'd lied to protect it. Then, one evening, as he drove through the quiet city, he saw her. standing outside a small orphanage, surrounded by laughing children, her eyes soft and tired but full of light. He stepped out of the car. No suit, no guards, just himself. When Clara saw him, her breath caught. "I'm not here to ask for forgiveness," he said gently. "I'm here to earn it." The wind rustled the leaves, carrying the weight of their silence. Clara's gaze softened, but her words were careful. "Money can build walls, Adrian," she whispered. "But love only grows when you tear them down." And in that fragile moment, under the fading sun, he realized the richest thing he'd ever owned wasn't his empire. It was her heart. But destiny wasn't done testing them yet, because just when Adrian thought he'd won back her trust, a stranger appeared at the orphanage gates. Someone from Clara's past, with a secret that could destroy everything Adrian had just begun to rebuild. The stranger stood in the doorway of the orphanage, rain dripping from the brim of his worn hat. His presence alone was enough to silence the laughter of the children. Clara froze, her eyes wide, her breath caught halfway between shock and dread. "Clara," the man said, his voice rough, almost trembling. "It's been a long time." Adrian's gaze flicked between them, a sudden heaviness pressing in his chest. The way Clara's fingers clenched, the way her lips parted without a sound. This wasn't a simple meeting. It was something buried deep, something that had finally clawed its way back into the light. Her voice came out soft, almost breaking. "What are you doing here, Samuel?" Samuel. The name alone carried a weight Adrian could feel in the air. The man stepped closer, his eyes dark and filled with something Adrian couldn't read, guilt, perhaps, or longing. "I heard about you," Samuel said quietly. "How you've been taking care of the children, how you've built this place. I came to make things right." Clara's breath shuddered. "You can't make things right. Not after what you did." The children watched silently from the steps, sensing the storm in the adults' voices. Adrian wanted to speak, to protect her, but he knew this wasn't his moment. He stepped back, let her confront the ghost of her past. Samuel's gaze dropped. "I didn't mean to hurt you," he said, "but I was desperate. You know that." Clara's eyes glistened, tears threatening to spill. "Desperate?" she repeated, her tone sharp and trembling. "You left me in debt, Samuel. You stole everything we had and disappeared. Do you know what that did to me? To the children who depended on that money?" Adrian's jaw tightened. He hadn't known Clara's past. She had always been quiet about it. Her eyes shadowed whenever he asked about her life before Mrs. Davenport. But now, the pieces began to fall into place. Samuel ran a hand over his face. "I came back because I've changed," he said. "I built something honest this time. And I wanted you to know I never stopped thinking about you." The words hung there like poison. Clara took a slow step back. "Don't," she said, her voice breaking. "Don't you dare say that." Adrian moved closer, instinctively, not to claim her, but to shield her. Samuel's eyes flicked to him, recognition dawning. "And who's this?" he asked, his voice sharp now. Clara hesitated. He's someone who's helped me." "Helped you?" Samuel's gaze narrowed, then suddenly darkened with cruel amusement. "Oh, I see. Another rich man playing savior." Adrian's eyes hardened. "You don't know me," he said evenly. "I know you're kind." Samuel spat. "You walk in with your money, your smooth words, thinking you can fix lives you'll never understand." "Enough," Clara snapped, her voice rising for the first time. The children flinched. "Both of you. This isn't about pride or money. Samuel, if you came here to make peace, then say what you need to say and leave." For a moment, the only sound was the rain against the tin roof. Samuel's expression softened, regret bleeding through the anger. "I came to give back what I took," he said, pulling an envelope from his coat. "It's not everything, but it's what I have. You deserve that much." Clara stared at it, her chest rising and falling. Then, quietly, she shook her head. "Money won't fix what you broke." He dropped the envelope on a bench and turned away, his footsteps echoing through the hall. But before he reached the door, he glanced back. "For what it's worth," he said softly, "I'm glad you found someone who didn't give up on you." And then he was gone. The children returned to their play, their laughter hesitant at first, then gradually returning. Clara stood still, staring at the door long after it had closed. Adrian stepped forward, his voice gentle. "You don't have to explain." But Clara shook her head. "Yes, I do," she whispered. "You deserve to know." They walked outside, under the overhang where the rain fell in soft silver threads. Clara's eyes stayed fixed on the street. "Samuel was my husband," she said quietly. "We married young. He was charming, kind, or so I thought. But the day I found out he'd taken everything, the money for the orphanage, the savings I'd worked years for, he was gone, vanished without a word." Adrian listened silently, the ache in his chest deepening. "I had nothing left," she continued. "Not even a home. Mrs. Davenport found me on the street and took me in. She gave me work, a roof, and a second chance at life." She turned to him, her eyes glimmering with pain and resilience. "I learned never to depend on anyone again, especially men who could take everything with a single lie." Her words struck him like a quiet blade. He understood now why his deception had wounded her so deeply. "Clara," he began, his voice low, "I can't erase what I did, but I'll never lie to you again. Whatever happens, I'll face it with you, not above you." She looked at him for a long moment, searching his eyes for truth. Then, almost imperceptibly, she nodded. The days that followed brought a fragile calm. Samuel didn't return, but his shadow lingered. Adrian began to spend more time at the orphanage, helping repair the old roof, painting the walls, fixing broken furniture. The children adored him. They followed him everywhere, their laughter chasing away the ghosts that had haunted Clara's heart. One evening, as the last streaks of sunset faded, Clara found him kneeling in the courtyard, surrounded by children's giggles and paint-stained brushes. She smiled softly. "You're getting good at this," she teased. He grinned. "Occupational hazard. I used to build companies. Now I build swing sets." Her laughter was light, but there was warmth in it, the first true smile he'd seen since that night. As the days passed, whispers began to spread. The city had discovered that Adrian Voss was alive. Journalists prowled for his story. Investors demanded meetings, and the corporate world stirred with questions. But Adrian didn't leave. When his assistant finally found him and begged him to return to his office, Adrian only said, "Not yet. There's something here worth more than any deal." But fate has a cruel way of testing resolve. One morning, as Clara was preparing breakfast for children, two men in black suits arrived at the orphanage. Their tone was brisk, their faces unreadable. "Miss Clara James?" one asked. "Yes. We're here regarding the property. The land this orphanage is built on has been sold. You have 30 days to vacate." The words hit her like ice. "What?" she breathed. "That's impossible. I've been paying." "The ownership has changed hands," the man interrupted. "All documentation will be sent by mail." They left before she could say another word. Her hands shook as she read the notice later that evening. The buyer's name was hidden behind a corporate shell. She didn't understand how it had happened, until Adrian walked in and saw the letter. His expression darkened instantly. "This company, it's mine," he said slowly. "Or it was—" Clara's eyes widened. "What do you mean?" He clenched the paper in his fist. "Someone inside my company, one of my board members, must have made the purchase. They're trying to force me back." The room went silent. The children's laughter in the background felt like a cruel echo. Clara looked at him, her heart sinking. "So they're using me to control you." Adrian's jaw tightened. "Not for long," he said, his voice cold with resolve. She touched his arm gently. "Adrian, please, don't fight them for me. I've lost homes before. I can build again." But he looked at her, eyes burning with something fierce and unshakable. "This isn't about a building, Clara. It's about the people who live in it. The children. You!" Outside, thunder rumbled over the horizon. A new storm brewing, one that neither of them yet understood. And as Adrian turned away, his mind already racing with plans, Clara felt the chill of something deeper, a sense that this battle would cost more than either of them expected. The storm that followed was unlike any Adrian had ever faced, not of nature, but of man. In his world, battles were fought with contracts and signatures. not swords. Yet this one was personal, and it burned in him with a fire he hadn't felt in years. The morning after the notice arrived, Adrian returned to the city for the first time in months. The towering glass of Voss Industries shimmered under the sun, cold and arrogant, a monument to his success and perhaps his greatest failure. As he stepped into the marble-floored lobby, every eye turned. Whispers rippled through the staff like wind through leaves. The ghost of their missing billionaire had returned. "Call a board meeting," Adrian said simply. His tone left no room for hesitation. Within the hour, the room filled 12 men and women, each with practiced smiles and guarded eyes. At the head of the table sat Leonard Kane, Adrian's longtime associate. Brilliant, cunning, and the one person Adrian once trusted most. Leonard rose, feigning surprise. "Adrian, you're alive." "Disappointed?" Adrian asked quietly, his gaze sharp as a blade. Leonard's smile didn't falter. "On the contrary, we were concerned. You vanished, and the company needed leadership. I did what I had to do." Adrian dropped a folder on the table. "Including buying land that doesn't belong to you? Land used to shelter orphan children?" The room fell silent. Leonard's jaw tightened. It was a business decision. The property sits on valuable ground. You of all people should understand profit. Adrian leaned forward, his voice low and dangerous. "Profit means nothing if it destroys what's human. I built this empire to create, not to crush." Leonard laughed softly. "You built it to control. Don't pretend otherwise. You hide billions, disappear like a saint chasing love, and now return preaching morality? You're not a savior, Adrian. You're a hypocrite with a guilt complex." The words hit hard, but Adrian didn't flinch. "You're right," he said. "I did lose myself chasing power. But I've seen what real worth looks like now, and it doesn't live in this room." He slid a document across the table. "Effective immediately, I'm retaking full control of Voss Industries. And that property, the orphanage, will be donated permanently to the city under Clara's name." The board erupted in protest. Leonard's eyes blazed. "You can't do that without majority approval." Adrian's lips curved into a thin smile. "I already have it. I bought back every share you sold, quietly while you thought I was gone." For the first time, Leonard's composure cracked. "You planned this." "I learned from the best," Adrian said, his voice soft with steel. "You taught me what greed looks like. Thank you for the lesson." By evening, the deed was done. The orphanage was safe, its ownership sealed under Clara's foundation, untouchable. When Adrian returned to countryside that night, the children were asleep, their soft laughter echoing faintly in the quiet halls. Clara was sitting alone by the window, the lamplight glimmering against her hair. He approached quietly. "It's done," he said. "The orphanage is yours. No one can take it again." She turned, eyes searching his face. "You didn't have to do that." "I did," he said simply. "Because this place, these children, they're part of you. And I couldn't let anyone destroy what made you who you are." For a long moment, neither spoke. Rain whispered against the glass, soft and rhythmic. Clara's voice broke the silence at last. "You gave up your company, didn't you?" Adrian's faint smile was tinged with something bittersweet. "Some of it. Enough to make sure I'll never be that man again, the one who counted love like currency." She rose slowly, walking closer until the space between them disappeared. "You've changed, Adrian." He looked into her eyes, calm, unguarded, real. "You did that," he said. Her lips parted, a breath caught in her throat. "And if I said I was still afraid?" "Then I'd wait," he whispered. "As long as it takes." But life has its own rhythm, one that moves quietly until a moment arrives when everything breaks and everything begins again. Weeks passed. The orphanage flourished. Donations poured in after news of Adrian's act reached the media. They called him the billionaire who chose love over power. But Adrian avoided the spotlight. He preferred the soft chaos of the children, the peace of building something that didn't have stock prices attached to it. One evening, Clara found him helping a small boy fix a broken toy car. His hands, once used to signing billion-dollar deals, were covered in glue and paint. She laughed softly. "You look happier now," she said. He glanced up. "I am. For the first time, I'm not chasing anything." Her heart warmed at his words. She had seen men lose themselves in pursuit of wealth, power, admiration. But here was one who had lost everything and found his soul instead. The next morning, the children held a small celebration. Balloons, music, clumsy decorations. It was the anniversary of the orphanage's founding. As laughter filled the air, Adrian stood at the back, watching Claire with the children, her smile radiant, her eyes alive. And then she saw him watching. Their gazes met, and something wordless passed between them. When the music faded and the children scattered, she walked over, her steps slow, deliberate. "You never told me what you plan to do now," she said. Adrian looked at her for a moment before answering. "I think I'll stay. There's a lot still to fix around here." Her lips curved in amusement. "You, the great Adrian Voss, fixing leaky roofs and painting fences?" He smiled. "You'd be surprised what I'm capable of now." The air between them thickened, heavy with unspoken things. Clara's hand brushed against his. Just a touch, but it sent a quiet spark through them both. Before she could pull away, he caught her hand gently. "Clara," he said, his voice low, almost reverent, "I spent my whole life surrounded by people who wanted my fortune. And when I hit it, I found you, someone who wanted nothing but to give." Her eyes glimmered. "I didn't give because I wanted something back, Adrian. I gave because that's all I had left." "And you gave me everything," he murmured. Tears welled in her eyes, but she smiled, a trembling, radiant smile that reached the depths of him. "Then maybe," she whispered, "we both found what we were missing." He drew her closer, not with grandeur or fire, but with the quiet certainty of two souls who had walked through storms and found their way home. But destiny, ever poetic, had one last gift to give. Months later, the orphanage received a letter, not from a corporation or a bank, but from the city council. They wanted to expand the foundation into a network of shelters across the country, funded in part by a trust Adrian had quietly built under Clara's name. Her hands trembled as she read it. "You did this?" she asked, looking at him. He smiled softly. "We did this. You showed me what to build for." That evening, as the sun melted into gold over the horizon, the two of them stood outside the orphanage. Children's laughter floated through the air, mingling with the soft hum of life and promise. Clara leaned her head on his shoulder, and for the first time in years, Adrian felt whole, not as a billionaire, not as a man searching for love, but as someone finally found by it. The wind carried the scent of rain and new beginnings. Adrian spoke softly, his voice barely a breath. "You once said love doesn't have a price tag." Clara smiled against his shoulder. "It doesn't." He turned slightly, his gaze tender. "You were right. But it does have value, immeasurable, infinite, and real." She looked up at him, her eyes glowing with the reflection of the setting sun. "And what will you do with all that value, Mr. Voss?" He chuckled. "Spend the rest of my life protecting it." Her laughter was light, full of warmth and peace. "Then I suppose we both finally got what we were searching for." In the distance, thunder rumbled faintly. Not the sound of storm, but the echo of a world that would never quite stop testing them. Yet this time neither feared it, because they had learned that love, true love, doesn't hide from storms. It dances through them, hand in hand, unbroken, unbought, and unafraid. And somewhere beyond the fading light, where shadows met the last breath of day, the man who had once hidden his billions to find love realized he had found something even greater, a legacy of kindness, built not on gold, but on the beating heart of a woman who taught him what it meant to be human. The world would tell their story for years. The billionaire who gave up everything to love a maid who needed nothing but truth. But for them, the story wasn't over. It had only just begun. In the laughter of children, the whisper of the wind, and the promise of forever that lived quietly between two hearts that had finally come home.